In the quiet outskirts of a wooded town, where nature and civilization met in a delicate balance, an unusual visitor arrived at the doorstep of a modest home. It was a mother bear, her thick fur damp from the evening mist, her deep brown eyes filled with something that wasn't aggression, but desperation. Behind her, two small cubs huddled close, their tiny frames trembling as they peeked around their mother's legs. At first, the sight was alarming. Bears were known to keep their distance, wary of humans, just as people were cautious of their wild neighbors. But this night was different. The mother bear did not roam aimlessly or scavenge through garbage bins. She stood firm, her massive paws planted in the soft earth, her gaze locked onto the house as if she understood that inside there was someone who could help. And then there was the baby, a human baby, only a few months old, nestled safely in the arms of their mother. Through the glass of the front door, the infant cooed, watching the wild family outside with innocent curiosity. No fear, no hesitation, just wonder. The air was thick with an unspoken plea. Something was wrong. The mother bear let out a low, mournful sound, nudging one of her cubs forward. That was when the homeowners noticed a terrible injury on the tiny creature's leg, raw and swollen. The cub winced but stayed close to its mother, its small eyes searching for mercy. It was an impossible moment, one that defied logic and instinct. A mother bear, known to be fiercely protective, was asking for help from a human, a gesture so rare, so profound, that it struck deep into the hearts of those who witnessed it. What happened next would leave everyone in tears. The cold night air carried an eerie stillness as the mother bear stood her ground, her deep brown eyes locked onto the humans inside the house. She let out another low, pleading growl, gently nudging her injured cub forward. The tiny bear whimpered, barely able to put weight on its wounded leg. Inside, Sarah and her husband, Mark, exchanged uneasy glances. They had lived near the forest for years and knew that wild animals, especially bears, never approach humans without reason. But this wasn't aggression. This was desperation. Mark took a cautious step toward the door, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. Through the glass, he could see the cub's tiny body trembling, its fur matted with dirt and blood. His gut clenched. The little one was in bad shape. "We have to do something," Sarah whispered, clutching their infant son, Noah, closer to her chest. Noah, unaware of the tension, simply reached out his tiny hand toward the glass, gurgling happily at the wild family outside. Mark hesitated. "It's a wild animal, Sarah. The mother might not let us get close." But as if she understood, the mother bear did something extraordinary. She backed away, just slightly, enough to show she wasn't a threat. Only a mother hoping for kindness. That was all Sarah needed. Without another thought, she grabbed the emergency animal aid kit they kept for injured wildlife and carefully stepped outside, Mark close behind her. The mother bear watched, unmoving, her massive body a silent guardian over her cubs. Sarah crouched low, extending a hand. The injured cub sniffed the air but didn't move, its little chest rising and falling in rapid, panicked breaths. "It's okay, baby," Sarah whispered. "We're going to help you." Mark moved cautiously, taking out a thick towel. Slowly, gently, he wrapped it around the cub, lifting it into his arms. The tiny bear let out a pitiful cry, and the mother bear growled low in response, but she didn't attack. She simply watched, trusted. The cub was hurt worse than they thought. A deep gash ran along its leg, likely from sharp rock or maybe even a trap. Infection had begun to set in. It wouldn't survive the night without care. Sarah's hand shook as she cleaned the wound, applying an antibiotic ointment and wrapping it with gauze. Every whimper from the cub felt like a dagger to her heart. The mother bear paced a few feet away, watching their every move, but she didn't intervene. Noah, still peering from the doorway, let out a small giggle. His tiny voice floated through the night, soft and pure. The mother bear turned her head toward the sound, her expression unreadable, but something in her posture softened. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the wound was cleaned and wrapped. The cub nestled into Mark's arms, exhausted but safe. "What now?" Mark asked. Sarah looked at the mother bear, then at the tiny life they held. We have to give him back. Carefully, Mark walked toward the massive bear, his every muscle tense. He knelt and gently placed the cub onto the soft earth. The little one stirred, letting out a small sound. The mother bear stepped forward, sniffing her baby. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, as if she understood that these humans had done no harm, she let out a deep, rumbling exhale, a sound of relief. She nudged her cub onto its feet, supporting its tiny frame as it wobbled unsteadily. Then, with one last lingering look at the humans, she turned and guided her babies back into the dark embrace of the forest. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she watched them disappear into the trees. "They trusted us," she whispered, holding Noah close. Mark let out a shaky breath. "I don't think I'll ever forget that." And neither would the mother bear. Days had passed since the night of the rescue. The mother bear and her cubs had disappeared into the forest, but Sarah and Mark couldn't stop thinking about them. Every morning, Sarah would peek out the window, half expecting to see the mother bear waiting outside, her deep brown eyes silently asking for help again. But the Wild family was gone, or so they thought. One crisp morning, as Sarah stepped outside with a cup of coffee, a soft rustling in the trees caught her attention. She froze, her heart pounding. At the edge of the clearing stood the mother bear. But she wasn't alone. Peeking from behind her was the injured cub, its legs still wrapped in the gauze Mark had carefully applied. It was healing, but still weak. The mother bear stood still, watching Sarah with the same quiet intensity from that fateful night. Then, something unexpected happened. From the porch, a new presence emerged. Daisy, their old golden retriever. The gentle dog had been part of their family for years, her gray-flecked fur a testament to her age. Normally, she barked at any sign of wildlife, but today she only tilted her head, her tail wagging softly. Sarah held her breath as Daisy took slow, cautious steps toward the wild visitors. The mother bear let out a low huff, a sound of warning, but the cub, small, curious, still trusting, stepped forward. For a moment, everything was still. Then, Daisy did what Daisy always did. She greeted the cub like an old friend, lowering her head and sniffing gently. The cub hesitated, lifting a cautious paw before mirroring Daisy's gesture, pressing its small nose into the retriever's soft fur. Sarah blinked in disbelief. The mother bear made no move to stop them. She simply watched as her cub, once injured and helpless, interacted with this gentle domestic creature as if sensing no danger. A deep warmth spread in Sarah's chest. It was an impossible sight, something out of a fairy tale. From that day on, the mother bear and her cubs returned often, never staying too long, but always appearing near the clearing. And every time, Daisy would be there, waiting patiently. At first, it was just cautious curiosity, soft sniffs, hesitant steps, lingering glances. But soon, the bond grew. The cub, still too weak to venture deep into the forest with its mother for long, found comfort in Daisy's presence. It would playfully bat at the retriever's wagging tail, nibble at her floppy ears, and follow her around the clearing as if she were another sibling. And Daisy? She accepted the little bear without hesitation, treating it as gently as she had when Noah was just a baby. She would lie down next to the cub, letting it curl up beside her, their breaths slow and synchronized. Sarah and Mark watched in awe. They had never seen anything like it. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the trees, the mother bear approached once more. This time, she didn't just stand at a distance. She moved closer, closer than ever before. Sarah and Mark remained still, watching as the massive bear approached Daisy and her cub. There was no aggression, no fear. The mother bear exhaled deeply, lowering her head just slightly, a silent acknowledgement. And then, just as before, she led her cub away. Sarah wiped at the tears in her eyes, unable to explain what she had just witnessed. Love, trust, and understanding, they weren't just human emotions. Sometimes, even the wildest hearts could find unexpected bonds. And sometimes, an old golden retriever could remind the world that love knew no boundaries. The visits became routine. Every few days, as the golden light of morning stretched across the clearing, the mother bear and her cubs would emerge from the trees. The injured cub, though still smaller than its sibling, had grown stronger, its limp barely noticeable now. But despite its recovery, it never forgot the kindness it had received. And neither did Daisy. From the moment the cub arrived at the edge of the property, Daisy would bound forward, tail wagging, a joyful bark escaping her throat. The cub, once hesitant and cautious, now greeted the old golden retriever with an excited huff, bouncing forward on its sturdy paws. At first, their interactions were simple, curious sniffing, quiet companionship, a shared spot in the sun. But as the days passed, their bond deepened, shifting into something even more remarkable. Daisy, with her patient and nurturing nature, became more than just a friend. She became a teacher. One afternoon, Sarah watched from the porch as Daisy trotted across the yard, a well-worn tennis ball clutched in her mouth. She dropped it at the cub's feet, tail thumping expectantly. The cub cocked its head, staring at the strange object. Daisy nudged the ball closer with her nose, then backed up, waiting. The cub hesitated before swiping at it with its paw, sending the ball rolling. Daisy leaped forward, scooped it up in her mouth, and returned, dropping it again. A new game had begun. At first, the cub didn't quite understand the purpose, but over the following days, it learned. It watched Daisy chase the ball, fetch it, and return, its tiny mind slowly piecing together the rules. And then, finally, it happened. One day, the cub batted the ball, watched it roll, and instead of waiting for Daisy to retrieve it, it ran after it itself. Sarah gasped, unable to stop the delighted laugh that bubbled up in her throat. A bear cub playing fetch. Daisy barked happily, prancing around her unusual pupil, and for the first time, the cub let out a playful growl, a small, happy sound that was neither wild nor fearful. It was pure joy. As the seasons began to change, the bond between Daisy and the cub grew even stronger. It wasn't just about play anymore, it was about trust. One evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Sarah stood by the window, watching the sky darken. The storm was approaching fast. She sighed, turning to call Daisy inside before the rain started. But before she could step onto the porch, movement in the trees caught her eye. The mother bear and her cubs were there again, lingering at the forest's edge. But something was different. The mother bear didn't press forward like before. Instead, she turned, nuzzled her other cub, and then, with a final lingering glance at the clearing, she disappeared into the woods. But the once injured cub remained. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It stood there, ears twitching as the wind picked up, its small frame uncertain. And then, with hesitant steps, it walked forward, not toward the woods, but toward Daisy. Daisy, who had been resting on the porch, lifted her head, ears perking up. She let out a low whine, then rose to her feet and trotted forward. Without hesitation, the cub pressed its small body against Daisy's side, nestling into her warm fur as the first raindrops began to fall. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. The cub had chosen Daisy as its safe place. She watched as Daisy gently licked the cub's forehead, a quiet reassurance that it was okay. As the storm rolled in, the two curled up together under the shelter of the porch, the wild cub seeking comfort in the only place it had ever felt safe. As autumn arrived, the cub continued to grow, its body stronger, its confidence blooming. But no matter how much it changed, one thing remained the same: its love for Daisy. It followed her around the clearing, mimicked her movements, and even wagged its tiny stub of a tail when excited. When Daisy lay in the sun, the cub sprawled beside her, soaking in the warmth. When Daisy went to drink from the creek, the cub padded alongside her, dipping its muzzle into the water. And every night, when the sun dipped below the trees, the mother bear would return, collecting her cub once again. But she never took it too far. Perhaps she understood that this bond was something special. That, in a world where wild and tame were meant to be separate, something beautiful had grown between them. Sarah and Mark often joked that Daisy had adopted a bear. But the truth was, the bear had adopted Daisy too. And no matter where life led them, that bond, built on kindness, trust, and unconditional love, would never fade. As the cub grew stronger and more independent, its bond with Daisy deepened, but it wasn't without challenges. The first test came when the mother bear, sensing that her cub had recovered, began encouraging it to spend more time in the forest. At first, the cub resisted, lingering at the edge of the clearing, looking back toward the house as if torn between two worlds. Daisy would stand on the porch, tail wagging, waiting for the cub to return. Some days it did. Other days it didn't. One evening, after a longer absence than usual, the cub reappeared, but something was different. It was scared. Sarah noticed it immediately, the way its small frame trembled, the way its ears stayed pressed back against its head. Daisy sensed it too. She let out a low, reassuring whine and trotted forward, gently pressing her nose against the cub's fur. Then Sarah saw it, deep scratches along the cub's back, fresh and raw. Mark knelt beside them, concern darkening his expression. Something must have attacked it. A coyote? Another bear? They didn't know. But whatever had happened, it had shaken the cub deeply. Daisy, however, didn't hesitate. She licked the cub's wounds the way a mother would, her warm, gentle presence providing the comfort it needed. Slowly, the cub stopped shaking, leaning into Daisy's soft fur as though drawing strength from her. That night, despite the growing chill of autumn, the cub curled up beside Daisy on the porch, sleeping soundly for the first time in days. Another challenge came as the cub grew larger. Its playful swipes became stronger, its size more imposing. While it still acted like the same curious, gentle companion, Sarah and Mark couldn't ignore the truth. This was a wild animal, one that would soon be too big, too powerful, to safely interact with their home and family. One day, as Daisy and the cub played in the yard, things got a little too rough. The cub, caught up in excitement, swatted at Daisy with more force than intended. Daisy let out a startled yelp, stumbling back. The cub froze, its ears flattening in guilt. It had never hurt Daisy before. For a moment, Sarah worried, was this the moment their bond would break? But then, Daisy stepped forward, pressing her head against the cub's chest, tail wagging softly. The cub let out a small, remorseful huff and lowered itself to the ground, showing submission. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The lesson had been learned, not through punishment but through trust. The cub now understood its strength and, more importantly, how to be gentle. As winter approached, the visits from the mother bear and her cubs became less frequent. The wild called, and soon they would need to retreat into the depths of the forest. One evening, just as the last golden leaves clung to the trees, Sarah heard a deep, warning bark from Daisy. She rushed to the window and saw the golden retriever standing protectively in front of the cub, her body tense. A coyote stood at the edge of the clearing, its hungry eyes locked onto the young bear. The cub, still learning its place in the world, let out a weak growl, but it was Daisy who stood firm. She barked sharply, stepping forward, her old yet strong frame refusing to back down. The coyote hesitated. Then, from the shadows of the trees, another form emerged, the mother bear. She let out a deep, guttural growl that echoed through the clearing. The coyote bolted. Sarah exhaled, placing a hand over her heart. The cub turned to Daisy, nudging her with its nose in gratitude. And for the first time, the mother bear also acknowledged the retriever, dipping her head slightly before leading her cubs back into the safety of the woods. The challenges only strengthened the bond between Daisy and the cub. Through pain and healing, fear and protection, they had built something rare, something that neither time nor distance could erase. Even when the cub finally disappeared into the forest for good, leaving behind only paw prints in the snow, Daisy still waited by the porch, watching the tree line with quiet patience. Because love, no matter how wild or unexpected, always finds a way to endure. The first snowfall of winter blanketed the forest in white, silencing the world with its soft hush. Sarah stood on the porch, wrapped in a thick coat, watching Daisy as she sat at the edge of the clearing, eyes fixed on the tree line. The golden retriever had been more restless than usual, pacing near the house, her ears perking at every distant rustle. She was waiting. And then, just as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, it happened. A sharp, distressed cry rang through the trees. Daisy shot up, her body tensed. Sarah's heart pounded as another cry followed, this time more desperate. The cub. Without hesitation, Daisy took off toward the sound, paws kicking up snow. "Daisy, wait," Sarah called, but the dog was already disappearing into the woods. Mark grabbed a flashlight and ran after her, Sarah close behind. The cold air stung her lungs as they pushed through the dense trees, following the trail of disturbed snow. Then they saw it. At the base of a steep ravine, the cub was trapped. A fallen tree had pinned its hind leg, its small body trembling as it struggled to break free. The mother bear stood nearby, growling lowly, but there was something wrong. She wasn't moving closer. That's when Sarah noticed the ice. The ground surrounding the cub was slick, treacherous. One wrong step, and the mother bear could slide straight into the ravine. She was stuck, unable to help her own child. But Daisy wasn't. Without hesitation, the golden retriever moved forward, carefully stepping onto the icy ground. Sarah held her breath. "No, Daisy, be careful." Daisy crept toward the cub, her paws finding grip where the bear's massive weight could not. Reaching the trapped cub, she nudged its face gently, offering comfort. The cub let out a weak, relieved sound, licking Daisy's muzzle. Then, Daisy did something remarkable. She grabbed a branch in her teeth and pulled, trying to shift the fallen tree. It barely budged, but the cub, understanding the effort, struggled harder. Mark moved quickly. "We have to help." He carefully made his way onto the icy ground, using his gloved hands to lift the heavy branch just enough for the cub to wriggle free. The moment its leg was loose, the cub stumbled forward, whimpering. The mother bear let out a deep, rumbling sound, half warning, half gratitude. The cub turned back to Daisy, pressing its forehead against her before limping toward its mother. The mother bear sniffed her child, ensuring it was safe. Then she looked at Daisy. For the first time, she acknowledged the dog, not just as a creature near her home, but as something more. A protector, a friend. Then, without another sound, she turned and led her cub away, disappearing into the snowy forest. Sarah wiped at her eyes, her breath catching. Daisy had done what no one else could. She had saved her wild friend. And in doing so, their bond was sealed forever. Winter settled in, blanketing the land in white, and with it came a quiet stillness. The mother bear and her cubs no longer appeared at the clearing. Sarah knew it was time. They had retreated into the depths of the forest, following the ancient rhythm of nature. Daisy still waited by the porch some days, her golden fur dusted with snow, ears perked toward the trees. But she wasn't sad. She knew, deep in her gentle heart, that her friend was safe. Weeks passed, then months. The seasons shifted once more, and as the first buds of spring peeked through the frost, Sarah and Mark went about their morning routine, sipping coffee on the porch. Daisy lay beside them, watching the world wake up. Then Sarah saw it. At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the trees, a familiar shape emerged. The young bear. But this time, it wasn't small and fragile. It was stronger, its coat thick and gleaming in the morning light. It had grown, no longer the helpless cub that had once sought shelter and comfort. And yet, as it stepped forward, there was no hesitation. The bear let out a low, friendly huff, the same sound it had made when greeting Daisy all those months ago. Daisy lifted her head, tail thumping. She didn't rush forward like before, didn't bark with excitement. Instead, she simply stood, staring at her old friend with quiet understanding. For a moment, they just existed, two souls who had once defied the barriers between wild and tame, who had formed a bond neither time nor distance could break. Then, as softly as it had come, the bear turned and disappeared into the trees once more. Sarah exhaled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Some friendships aren't meant to last forever in the way we expect, but that doesn't mean they ever truly fade. Daisy sighed, settling back down on the porch, her eyes still lingering on the trees. Maybe the bear would return again. Maybe not. But no matter what, they would always be part of each other's story. Because love, real love, never truly says goodbye.